Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We're going to finish up today with a special selection, which is where one of you tell me exactly what it is I need to check out. If you have your own song you'd like to submit for special selection, you can find a link to do so in the description below. Today's request comes at us from Gnome. It says, before I can request any more Pain of Salvation, Swans, or Fiona Apple, this one has to be done. NIGHTWISH, The Poet and the Pendulum, Live 2015. It's originally on the album Dark Passion Play with Annette, and this performance is with Fleur. The NIGHTWISH army will fill in the rest of the info. I'm sure this is going to appease quite a many people. Poet and the Pendulum is probably one of the most requested tracks I have seen. So, without further ado, let's check this out from the Vehicle of Spirit tour at Wembley 2015. Very theatric. We have this whimsical string and woodwind section with whispers, bringing in the operatic singing fairly early in this track. Yeah, what a moody way to start this song. Yeah, doing the snare strikes on those stingers really gives those moments a ton of punch. Interesting. They kept the string stingers, but really muted everything else down a bit. And the guitars come up with very full body. Keep it. Bring it up. Bring it up. Yeah, increasing the intensity with the chord progression on every piece of that phrase. I think this right here showcases just how powerful the guitars are in this mix, and for better or worse, it has its upsides, but what a strong hook though, just looking at it rhythmically. because really she just sits on one note. I mean, you can really feel how monotonous it is there as far as pitch goes, and it really does hook you in on rhythm alone. Alright, texture layering there since this is octave work. And I think it's excellent that they brought in this song with that theatric opening, or else I think this would have felt a little out of place. It works well for contrast, and it really helps that we started with a very similar theatric sound. This helps solidify this as a natural progression from the last rock section. Man, the bass has all the space here and barely does anything. The keyboard angle, jeez.
So afraid, being raped again and again and again. I know I will die alone, but loved. You live long enough to hear the sound of guns, long enough to find yourself screaming every night, long enough to see your friends betray you.
I'm just a little upset that the audio is desynced from the video.
Now I only have 3 minutes, counting. I just wish the tide would catch me first and give me a death I always longed for.
Interesting transition there. A lot of the other ones have been a bit smoother. I wonder if there's a storytelling purpose for that. Yeah, really nice drum fill to lead us into this. We've gone back to the same idea from the opening of our second section. Alright, injected a bit of intensity into it. Yeah, dude. Those crescendo slides from the strings and choir being led into with those the static picking sounds fantastic.
Passion play, performed by his friends without shame, spinning
the second movement's chorus. Now see, that was a smooth transition right there.
Was called from the cares of the world. He stopped crying at the end of each beautiful day. The music he wrote had too long been without silence. He was found naked and dead, with a smile on his face, a pen, and 1,000 pages of erased text.
Is it? Okay. I love anything that uses chimes. I do like the idea of the band just chilling there on the step in front of the drum for this chill section. I love that the bass is getting to drive this section. Finally getting some time in the spotlight. You know what's weird is I see the pianist playing that line right there. I could not hear it until everything cut out. I wonder how much of this is mixed from the live show and how much of it is studio laid on top of live footage. Because I have some questions about the production.
Thank you.
Hmm. think we're gonna start this video off with the positives, because this band did a lot of stuff right with this track, specifically looking at it as a storytelling piece rather than um, just a song. It feels closer to a work of art than just music for music's sake. And I think there's a lot of decisions, even on the micro level, looking at individual lines for individual instruments that supports this idea. Um, there aren't any specific instrument in here that really takes the spotlight, and that's because the song should be treated as a whole. But there are some aspects that I'm either confused on or have some criticism for. I'm going to hold that off for the end because I do want to talk primarily about some of the positive aspects first while they're still in my head. So I guess let's start with that. Storytelling. Um, oh, actually, there's chapters here. So we have part 1, White Lands of Emphatica, part 2, Home, 3 is the Pacific, 4 is Dark Passion Play, 5 is Mother and Father. Okay. So I was talking about it in movements during the thing, and when we brought the chorus back, I was like, oh, that's from movement 2. And they do put it in parts. Interestingly, the story of this track is an M. We start at a low point, we raise the intensity, we get back to a low point, we raise the intensity, we get back to a low point. And I think that does a pretty good job of creating the highs and lows that they are aiming for with this tail. I only picked up a couple of lyrics, and actually, in fact, I don't think I picked up any lyrics. I mostly picked up the narration. So I have a very limited understanding of what they were directly telling me was the story through word. A lot of this exploration I'm going to do before we get into the lyrics is entirely what the music is telling me. We have these highs and lows, though, and we start low and we end low. We actually don't really change much. The journey is more important than the destination, as they say. Our first idea, our first movement, White Lands of Emphatica, I think that this is probably the most important part of the song. I don't think it was always necessary. I mean, maybe from a lyrical standpoint, but musically, I could see this band start with movement 2. In fact, I've heard a couple of Nightwish songs that start at the high point. They get right into the action, and I think that this could have easily been that. Again, I have no insight into their creative process or how they compose the song, but I do kind of wonder if there was originally just a 4 movement version of this, which was 2 through 5, and that maybe the intro was added in later to balance it out. But it's such an important aspect of the track. One, it sets up the theatric element of it, which already puts me in the mind of storytelling. It makes me think that I'm in store for a journey, not just a song. It also sets up the theatric voice, which is something we're going to hear for the majority of this track. 3 of the 5 movements are in this style, more subdued, with more emphasis on the emotive element of the chordal movements than just the hard rocking part of that we get out of the rock or metal, whatever you want to call it, that we see in movements 2 and 4. And without it, like I had mentioned during the reaction, I don't think movement 3 would have felt as sincere. Because they do include strings in, and brass, at least strings, maybe brass in movement 2, but they're used texturally to give it a symphonic flair without actually really incorporating much from classical music. It just kind of gives it that extra texture of classical sound. So when we move into movement 3, we return, well, in this case, in our full version, we return to a sound we have already been to, which is a more full-bodied production as far as the composition goes. Um, we have more nuance in our instrumentation and the way that the instruments play and dance around each other, rather than the more rigid roles that are given in the rock settings in movement 2 and 4. It is a drastic shift. And if we had just been, hey, we're a rock band with strings, and then we moved to this more theatric element, I don't know if it would have really worked as well. But because they started and cemented the song as something that feels more theatric, it set it up so that when we return to it, it feels more like a return to form rather than a transition into an odd section of the track. And a lot of that just comes from the idea of having a minute to set this up at the beginning. Um, it also, the first movement kind of has this curtains opening kind of moment. Like when you're watching the beginning of a play or a musical and you're all sitting and then the lights dim and everybody stops talking and the curtains open and maybe some fog rolls in, or the orchestra begins playing the first track and then the people walk in to do the scene. It has all of that flair, that, oh, the electricity of beginning, right? Nothing's actually started yet. We haven't gotten to the part where people are talking, or we know where we're at, or we don't even know who the characters are. Sometimes they're not even on stage yet, but the story has begun. Visually, we can see the backdrop and the stage. The curtains have opened, the music has started, the lights have dimmed, and that's what it feels like. It is a really great way to start this song, at least from my perspective. Again, I don't know if other people feel it this way. This feels like a stage play to me. It really does. It is the opening to a stage play, and this is just the perfect introduction for that, while also functionally setting up our return to form here in our midpoint of the song. It is, like I said, this opening minute. How long was this? 1 minute and 15 seconds. The rest of this 14-minute track would not work as well without this 1 minute right here. It is so important to the entire track. And like I said, I kind of wonder if there was a version of this song that didn't have it, or if it was always there from the beginning. Like I said, I think there's some words here, there's some narration or something. There might have even been singing. Oh, you know what? I think there was just some operatic vocalization. I think that's what was going on here. Maybe there was some, I don't know. We'll get into the lyrics later. Like I said, I didn't really pick up on too many of the lyrics themselves. But yeah, being that there are, I think, lyrics here, maybe this was planned the whole time, because the story does lingually start here. Whereas if we had started in part 2, we might be missing part of the setup to the story. So maybe it was always a part of the plan, but like I said, I'm kind of curious if maybe it was added later on down the road, when they realized, hey, we have this phenomenal song, but something doesn't quite work. And it's not about tweaking things we have. There's actually something missing that should be at the beginning, that kind of thing. We move from this super theatric, atmospheric sound, right? It's all these long drawn out notes, really setting the emotion and vibe of it without laying down any melody or chord progression or anything like that. It's all atmosphere. We shift from this into part 2, which is called Home. This is when we enter our first rock moment. The guitars come in, the bass comes in, the drums are going on, rapid fire. I think the vocalist begins to sing pretty soon. I don't think it takes too long for us to get into the opening verse here. And it's just full on rock track right here. The bass is kind of doing some bassy stuff, not really doing too much like moving lines. It's really all about laying down. And remember, I don't want anybody to because I'm about to say that the bass was doing some simple stuff. I don't want anyone to listen to me say that and say, "Oh, he's ragging on the bass." Remember what I said at the beginning is that everything in here is designed to work as a whole. Nothing is designed to stand out. Also, remember that in like 30 minutes when we get to the end of the video, because there's another side to that coin I need to talk about. So yeah, the bass is doing stuff that doesn't allow it to stand out, which is mostly just kind of playing around with what the chord progression is, while rhythmically staying in line with what the drums are doing, to just provide this low-end floor for everything else. Um, and the guitar is just wailing away at these chords. I can't remember if they had a chord or a riff, but they were going along against what the keyboardist was doing with the strings. And he was utilizing these string stingers, which are these really bump, ba bump, 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 these really short staccato notes that are played not by a single instrument, but by an entire group, or sometimes even an entire orchestra. I think there was the brass was in this song somewhere. I don't remember if it was here yet, but at least an entire string section of these really short bump, ba dump, bump, bump, something like that. This very syncopated hit, or series of hits that was playing against the guitar rhythm. It was really nice how they kind of filled in each other's pockets, where the guitar would do something and then maybe hold a note, and in that space of not playing anything new, of just letting that tone ring out, you'll get one of these stingers. It's just really nice, the counterplay between the two instruments. Drums are mostly laying everything down right here. Yeah, and that's pretty much that. We get into the first verse, though. Everything quiets down. The guitarist quits entirely, I think. In fact, there was one part, I think it was in the second verse, you could see the guitarist walk over to the keyboardist and they're just having a little conversation over there. We have some strings going on. The bass is given the spotlight. It's drums, bass, and keyboard here with Flora on vocals, and you would think that the bass driving this whole section would be given something other to play than whole notes, but not really. Initially, I was kind of disappointed by this before I came to the conclusion that everything was designed to be unseen, right? It's supposed to craft the song as a whole experience. You're not supposed to focus on any instrument. So part of me really wishes, well, the bass guitar was the lead instrument here. Why weren't we seeing it do anything lead like? Why was it continuing to just lay down our chord progression? That's why. Like I said, I'm a bit disappointed by it, but I understand the reasoning for the choice. I think it works well in the concept of understanding what the song is, or how the song is designed to be experienced. And that's the verse. We have our vocals on top telling a story, has some nice melodic flow to it. And the song really quiets down for the vocals to shine. And we move from that into the chorus. The chorus has a rising intensity vibe. And I had pointed this out. We have one chord for 2 bars. We do the same chord for the next 2 bars. We bring up the intensity for the next 2 bars, and we bring up the intensity again for the next 2 bars. And the intensity is mostly driven through volume and chord progression. Our notes continue to rise, our pitch rises, our volume rises. It increases the tension that way. Interestingly, the guitar is mostly just doing chordal work right here, but multiple strums per chord. Our bass is pretty much doing the same thing, multiple hits per note. The notes are following the chord, the chord progression. Our vocalist sits on one note mostly and just kind of dances around it, half steps up, half steps down, not really moving too much. It can feel at times very monotonous, just hitting one note. But the thing is, like I had mentioned during the reaction, it is a catchy rhythmic component to it that everybody is in on. It is very cool. I say catchy, I can't remember it, but I also tried to cram 14 minutes of music into my head, so forgive me on that one. I'd wager if I listen to this a couple of times, though, maybe even just one more, that chorus is going to get stuck in my head. Maybe not the words themselves, but certainly the rhythm. There is something very energetic and ear catching about it. Um, so yeah, we have a lot of instruments not really doing a lot musically. It's a lot of rhythmic stuff, volume stuff, pitch stuff, but not really a lot of movement in the flow itself. It really is about, really diving into the heaviness, the weight, and the intensity of the situation. We go back down to the verse, same thing, back up to the chorus, same thing. And then we have our transition into part three, which is the Pacific. And I had mentioned that this was a harsh transition. Coming out of part one to part two was a seamless increase in intensity, in volume, power. We had a really nice rise into it. And then our verse and our chorus had really nice dips between them. We had nice crescendos and decrescendos to move between the quieter and the louder parts. And then we hit this wall, and part three just starts. We were heavy, now we're soft. We have this ocean in the background. We have this nice ethereal sort of atmosphere going on. And I enjoyed what this section did because it's hugely contrasting. That's the whole point of this section, is to say we were doing this, what's the opposite? And to give the listeners a moment to breathe, to relax, to understand what they just listened to comprehend all of that. And it's done so in a way that is very, again, I'm going to use the word simple. There's not a lot of stuff going on here. It really is, much like our intro idea, all about driving an atmosphere. And that kind of leans into part two as well. Not a lot of complexity in the ideas. It's about driving a specific emotion. 4 and 5. Yeah, I guess this whole song is built like that. It's not really built on anything complex. It's layering simple ideas to drive a specific emotion for each section's movements, emotion, the vibe they're going for, that they want the listener to experience while they're listening to it. There was some really nice vocals here. If I remember right, it was just vocalizations. I think this was the section where we got really strong operatic vocals from our vocalist. Just a really nice moment to showcase her vocal range. I don't think this is the best song for it. You guys had me listen to Ghost Love Score, I think, in the past, which was a phenomenal showcase of her range. But again, this song is not about having any one thing stand out. It is about having everything come together to tell a unified story. The song is more important than any specific performer. The story is more important than any specific actor. We moved out of here back into Dark Passion Play, and I don't remember what happened at the beginning here. I remember this was a heavier section, and I think there was a solo, maybe on the keyboards, maybe on the guitar. For some reason, I'm completely blanking out on this section. But I remember we had harshish vocals here, which were kind of interesting. I forgot to talk about that in Movement Two's chorus, as we got vocal harmonies, which was really nice. They were just octave based, but I think the bassist vocals and our lead vocalist vocals actually work really nicely together. Even though they were singing like 2 octaves apart, it still felt like they were the notes themselves were right next to each other. They just blended in with each other very well. But I remember we got some harsh vocals here and some sort of bridge section where like everybody was just kind of hanging out on a single note, and we really got this deep, dark heaviness, and we kind of alternated that with like these short snippets of growling, and then we go into something musically heavy, and then we get back to that growling. What stands out to me the most about this is that while the song has felt fairly linear, we had our intro, verse, chorus, interlude, quiet operatic section, growling section. Like, we're kind of hit a rhapsody now that we got out of the verse chorus idea in movement two, and we bring back the chorus from movement 2. That was neat. I was really expecting this to sort of follow a more linear fashion where each movement was going to be its own idea entirely, and instead we got this nice refrain from the second movement. So that was really nice. And we move out of this into our final section. Wait, no. There was something there, because part 4, I remember the keyboardist did like the death sign, and the lights went black, and I thought it was over. So there's actually this transition here I want to talk about, because we entered this very ominous section. There was a rhythmic thing. I think it was 3 hits on bass kick, snare, and tom, like doom, 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 something along those lines. And we had these really crisp string ideas going on. And I think this is where the brass came in as well. Just very, well, my mind put my, the image that came to my mind here was sitting in a guillotine, not face down, but face up, and watching the blade and knowing that any second it was going to drop. That kind of tension and anxiety is what was being portrayed here. And then the keyboardist did like the death sign. I was like, oh, I think somebody did die. And then it went to black, and I was like, oh, the song's over now. It came back out of that though, and we got some a return to more of the theatric, slower stuff, with our vocalist having these beautiful vocalizations on top of all of it, and that took us out of the track. So we have this story in here of calm, anxiety, tension, back to a sort of inner peace, right? Movement 3 to me is not, it is calming, but it's not calm like the beginning of the track, which is before anything bad happened. It's sort of trying to find an inner peace within the chaos, because as soon as that's over, we move right back into a chaotic section with anger and tension, heaviness. We return back to the refrain of our chorus, which again has that monotonous strikes that rises in tension. And then a possible death, and then peace. Part 5 is completely devoid of anything that I would call tense at all. It is a lot of the calming elements of part 3 without any of that ethereal aspect. It is, at least to me, more of a concrete sense of tranquility. It's less ephemeral, and I think that that's really important, assuming that this person does, or somebody does die in part 4. Either that person or the person who killed them has found a sort of hopefully longing peace now that that event has happened. And that's kind of the vibe I get through this track, is calm before the chaos, chaotic moments, trying to find peace within the chaos, not finding it, being thrust back into the chaotic moments, making a harsh decision, and finding a sort of peace or serenity through that final act. And they do a phenomenal job weaving this song through that. There, like I said, there wasn't really any part in here when I was like, oh, this one specific aspect is the heart of this section. Every piece, even when I picked out a specific thing, oh, listen to what the keyboard's doing here, listen to what the vocalist is doing, listen to what the drums are doing there. Even though I point them out, that's because I'm listening to it critically. I am specifically saying, I know you guys tell me I should absorb the song as a whole, but I'm going to listen individually and hear what's going on. That's my job, right? You guys come here for critical reaction. I have to critically listen to this music so I can do these analyses. So I understand I'm going against what they're asking, what they're preferring us as a listener to do in this situation as we listen to their art. But even pointing out all these things, the intended aspect is to just absorb the song as a whole, and I think they do a phenomenal job at doing that. They tell an interesting story musically through their highs and lows, through the ways that they utilize specific chord progressions, lack of pitch, use of pitch, harmony, atmosphere, texture. Like they utilize a lot of tools to craft this specific song, and they do so in a way that isn't flashy for any one specific instrument, so that the listener can absorb it all as a whole and treat it like a play. You don't. Well, I'm sure there are. Uh, Actors or directors or whatever, people in the industry who would watch a play and like hone in on stuff. But your average playgoer, stage play go I don't know. Theater goer? I think that's going to be the phrase I use. Your average theater goer is going to absorb everything: the orchestral music, the singing, the acting, the stage, the props. They're just going to take it all in as a single work of art. And I think that's what they're really forcing the listener to do here, even if it's somebody who is more traditionally going to be critical of specific instruments. They have crafted a sound that really tries to drive the listener towards a more casual, full listening experience rather than something that is more orchestrally listening where you're honing in on specific instruments. Even I had a tough time sometimes reminding myself, oh, dude, you're supposed to be listening to these instruments rather than absorbing it as a whole. The song really did try to force me into that casual mode multiple times. Um, so, with all of that said, they do a phenomenal job on the storytelling. There is one aspect I want to touch on before we hit the lyrics, because I had mentioned there's one thing that just didn't work for me, and that's the production. And that's why I asked in the middle of this, is this a true live recording, or is this a studio version over with a live footage overlaid it? Because there's multiple instances in here where it could kind of go either way, and I'm curious if the aspects I did not find as cohesive were because it was recorded live performance, which is going to be a bit more rougher around the edges than a studio performance, which is completely controlled. Although now that I'm thinking about it, somebody, what was it in the comment? Yeah, Yeah, it was in the comment. That this was not the original singer when this song was created. This was the singer that came after. And given that it's her vocals, I'm going to assume this is the live audio, which would explain some of my issues here. Primarily, our guitarist is way too hot. Way too hot. And you can tell in movement 2, when we ditch the guitar for the verses, just how empty the song feels without it. And I think that emptiness is supposed to be a part of the overall emotional roller coaster of the section, but I don't think it's supposed to hit as hard as it does. Because when the guitar comes back in for the chorus, it just totally wipes out everything else. It's so overpowering. Um, and it's distracting. It forces my ear to listen into what the guitar is doing, which, as I've explained many times, is sort of the opposite idea of what the song is trying to do. Not to mention, I really don't think the guitar often enough is that interesting. It really is doing background things, which makes sense with how the song is composed. It really does not need to be that high up in the mix. So, yeah, I am kind of thinking now that this is completely live audio, which would explain that. Um, I think that was the only thing I had negative to say about it. But it was a huge thing in movement 2 of really impacting my listenability of that section, just because it felt out of place every time. I think there was one other thing I wanted to say that was a bit of a criticism, and I can't remember what it is off the top of my head. So maybe it was a criticism that I talked myself out of as I further explored this. Because I don't know if you guys know, I might have said this a couple of times. When I'm doing these analyses, it really is kind of stream of consciousness. I kind of pack these ideas together loosely. We're going to talk about, the structure first, and then we're going to talk about the production, and then we're going to talk about what, the instrument's roles are. Um, but it's very loose topics that I just work my way through. I think through it as I'm talking to you guys, and sometimes I get ahead of myself and I get like swap topics real fast. Um, But yeah, so sometimes I do talk myself into appreciating something that, at least when I listened to it, was a bit rough for me, or maybe bounced off of me. And as I talk through some other topics, I come to a conclusion thinking, oh, maybe it wasn't that bad after all. And my brain just removes it out of the criticism pile. And when we get to the criticisms, I'm like, I thought I had more to say. But I think that's what happened. The production really is the only negative I had on this. Other than that, one sharp transition, which I already talked about where it fit musically. It was the transition out of part three, if I remember correctly. And like I said, I'm kind of hoping the lyrics just kind of clear that one up. So, with that said, let's get into the lyrics. So, part one does have words to it. I don't know if they were sung or if it was voiceover narration stuff. It says, "The end. The songwriter's dead. The blade fell upon him, taking him to the white lands of Emphatica, of innocence, Emphatica, innocence." Okay, so I talked about the fact that the ending to part four felt to me like a guillotine blade coming down on somebody. Right here, the opening, a songwriter has died and a blade fell on them. All right. So, part two, home. The dreamer and the wine, poet without a rhyme, a widowed writer torn apart by chains of hell. One last perfect verse is still the same old song. Oh Christ, how I hate what I've become. Take me home. So we have a creative. Calls him a dreamer, calls him a poet, but says that they are not the best at their work. Calls him poet without a rhyme. They're an artist without purpose. Says, but they write one more perfect verse, but it's the same thing that they've always done. They hate what they have become. So it almost sounds like this artist is feels locked into what they're doing, right? This could be, uh, you know, in modern day terms. Actually, this was 2015, wasn't it? It's pretty modern day. Maybe you're an actor and you get stuck inside of a contract and you don't like the film you're making or the director you're working with or whatever, but you got to do it, right? And maybe you just have a series of this, just picking bad projects and getting locked into them for one reason or another. And you kind of hate what you've become, right? You're stuck in this rut of utilizing your craft for something you don't believe in. Is kind of what I'm getting here. The poet without a rhyme, a widowed writer torn apart. So our chorus is get away, run away, fly away, lead me astray to dreamer's hideaway. I cannot cry 'cause the shoulder cries more, I cannot die, a whore for the cold world. Forgive me, I have but two faces, one for the world, one for God, save me. So yeah, I mean the idea of the whore for the cold world, right? There are outside influences that dictate what this creative can do, what they must do. It restricts their creative flow into doing specific things, and they hate, what they are doing with their craft, with their tools. But it says, I cannot die. I can't even cry about it. I just want to run away. I have the side that the world sees, and I have the side that only I see, or in this case, only that God sees. It says, someone save me. Well, it's an implied someone, but I kind of get that vibe. They're chained to this cage. They can't die, they can't cry, they wish they could leave. They need an external force to save them from this predicament. We get back into the verse. My home was there and then, those meadows of heaven, adventure-filled days, one with every smiling face. Please, no more words, thoughts from a severed head. No more praise, tell me once my heart goes right, take me home. So yeah, just kind of reflecting on past days before they were in this situation, in this not conflict, the situation that they're in, where they don't feel like they're utilizing their skills properly. So that's part two. Part three is the Pacific. Sparkle my scenery with turquoise waterfall with beauty underneath, the ever free. Tuck me in beneath the blue, beneath the pain, beneath the rain. Good night, kiss for a child in time, swaying blade, my lullaby. Interesting. On the shore we sat and hoped under the same pale moon whose guiding light chose you all. And whereas I think the metaphors were rather, I don't want to say that surface level on part two, I think the metaphor is kind of pushing into a different angle here on part three. It looks like they got their wish, possibly. They got taken away to a different place. They're being tucked in by some entity, tucked into bed beneath the blue, this turquoise waterfall, a scenery that sparkles. It says they get a goodbye kiss, which is the swaying blade is their lullaby. I'm telling that guillotine. I don't know how they put a guillotine image in my head just with music, but they did. And it's popped up in all three of these movements so far lyrically. We get the voiceover. I'm so afraid being raped again and again and again. I know I will die alone, but loved. You live long enough to hear the sounds of guns, long enough to find yourself screaming every night, live long enough to see your friends betray you. For years, I've been strapped into this altar. Now I only have 3 minutes and counting. I just wish the tide would catch me first and give me a death I've always longed for. So yeah, just going back to the idea of being the whore for the cold world, a person being utilized for their skills, and they're not utilizing their skills or their life in a way that they would deem would be more appropriate, more liberating, more, whatever, mentally good for their health. I can't think of the word I wanted there. It says, I've been raped again and again and again, and I'll die alone but loved. It almost sounds like, going back to the idea of the actor stuck in contracts or films they don't like doing. What if those films were hits, box office successes? He says that he'll die alone but loved, almost as if the work that this poet, that this artist, this dreamer is doing isn't what they want to do. It doesn't come from their heart. It is emotionally draining for them to not make anything that they want to make, but everybody loves what gets released. This person is held on a pedestal to continue to make the art that they do. Is this about someone in the band? Or maybe not directly, but did somebody feel artistically stifled when they wrote this? I don't know who the lyricist is. Was this the old vocalist who wrote these lyrics? I'm kind of curious now. So part 4 says, second robber to the right of Christ, cut in half, infanticide, the world will rejoice today as the crows feast on the rotting poet. Everyone must bury their own, no pact to bury the heart of stone. Now he's home in hell, serves him well, slain by the bell, tolling for his farewell. Next morning dawned upon his altar, remains of the dark passion play, performed by his friends without shame, spitting on his grave as they came. So it's interesting that not long after he said he's going to die alone but loved, it showcases that he dies to the right of Christ and not loved. People end up burying him, people close to him, says everyone must bury their own, but they say that our poet, our artist, is in hell, and it serves him well for that. That his friends come by his grave and spit on it. That is in complete contrast to what was mentioned in part 3, but part 3 was also in complete contrast to part 2. Like I said, it felt like they were whisked away with the sparkly scenery, the turquoise waterfall, somebody tucking them in, right? So I'm kind of curious how all of this fits together, because after this we run back into movement two's chorus about wanting to run away and fly away. After that, we have today in the year of our Lord 2005, Tomas was called from the cares of the world. He stopped crying at the end of each beautiful day. The music he wrote had too long been without silence. He was found naked and dead with a smile in his face, a pen, and 1,000 pages of erased text. Save me. Why do I know the name I mean, it's not an uncommon name. Tomas Holopinen? Yeah, he's a dude in Nightwish. It doesn't say what instrument. Lead composer, lead lyricist, lead writer. Also produced it. So was he feeling artistically stifled? Even wrote in his own death. Because, I mean, like, we go back for 3.5 parts now, 3.5 movements. We have this unnamed poet, this creative type, this dreamer. And we hear that they died and their friends did not care. And then we hear that this other person named Tomas also died. And he was also a poet, a smile on his face with a pen and 1,000 pages of erased text. Huh. Yeah, it kind of feels like Tomas, who is the lead everything in his band, lyricist, composer, producer, writer, that he was getting stifled and wrote a song about this writer's block, about not being able to make the art that he wanted to make. We end the track with part 5, Be Still, My Son, You're Home. When did you become so cold? The blade will keep on descending. All you need is to feel my love. Search for beauty, find your shore. Try to save them all and bleed no more. You have such oceans within. In the end, I will always love you. The beginning. I don't understand this part 5 at all. However, I like the way that the song started with the text the end and ends with the text the beginning. I think it showcases that the end is, well, actually it says the end, the songwriter's death, the blade fell upon him. So the end of this chapter is when Tomas allows this portion of him to be slain, to be killed, the part that he felt he was trapped in. And for this new section, the new era of his writing possibly to extend out. And I wonder if then if we take this another step, and he says that he will die alone but loved, is that about the fandom? That he continued to write music for the band that he just wasn't connecting with, but he thought the fans wanted, and then the sales justified that perspective? And, the fans didn't actually know that he was hurting. The fans just kept buying this music that he didn't really like making, and he had to kill that part of himself to move on. Like, now I'm really curious if the fans just didn't understand what was actually going on with the music. Anyways, that's my reading of it. And I think that does fit with the overall flow that I described in the music and the themes that they explored within the music, including the highs and the lows, the storytelling approach, and even kind of reflects a little bit of that stage play element in the lyrics. I think I had a pretty good read on it. Although, pretty good read also extends to the other side that they did a phenomenal job at telling the story they wanted to tell within the music as well as the lyrics. I can only read into what they actually put in there. I can't just pull random stuff out of the music. So, giving myself a little pat on the back for kind of nailing everything thematically, but also a huge round of applause to Poet and the Pendulum. I would not have been able to read any of that if they didn't put it in. So, genius story or genius songwriting from them as well. Or I guess from Tomas. I don't know how to pronounce that. It is not the American way to spell Thomas, so I don't want to say Thomas, even though that's what my American brain tells me to say. And now I'm kind of curious. Oh, he's Finnish. I'm kind of curious how to pronounce that now. Anyways, those are my thoughts on Nightwish's The Poet and the Pendulum. This is where you guys come in. Hit me up in the comments. Let me know if you enjoyed this reaction at all, if there's anything that stood out to you, anything you'd like to add to my thoughts or correct me on. And that wraps it up for today. You guys want to head into the comment section? No, above the comment section into the description box. There's a link in there for Linktree. It takes you to this menu right here. You can check out everything related to the channel, such as picking up merch, join the Patreon and the Discord, follow me on Twitter, email me, or submit your own special selections if you have a song that you really want me to check out. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. And that wraps it up for today. I'll be back tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC as usual. Till next time, remember to be critical but not cynical of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening whenever you choose to watch my videos.